Welcome back to Aviland Creative. In this video, I am giving you some pointers for finding photography studios to rent by the hour. There are going to be situations where portrait photographers, even if you're natural light photographers, you're going to need a studio space to work, whether it's the frigid cold winter, you have a client that's specifically requesting a studio look, or something like that, or you're doing a series of minis that you want to be in studio, or you're doing a newborn session where it really needs to be a controlled atmosphere. There are many different reasons why you would need a studio, but only for a few hours. So I personally currently have a studio share, which means that I have grouped together with a number of other people to rent a specific space for a studio. And that comes in really handy. But before I did a studio share, I occasionally had to rent studios elsewhere, and I am sharing my tips with you today. First of all, there are two different types of studios. The typical studio thought is that you have all artificial light and no natural light at all, and that's just not true. Yes, there are absolutely studios that don't have any natural light, but there are also natural light studios available in many places across the US where you have natural light that you can either supplement with artificial light or go completely natural light. I usually go for a combination of artificial light and natural light. That's what I do in my studio and what I've done in a lot of rental studios in the past, and I'll show you some examples on the screen of images that I've taken in studios. So how do you find the perfect studio rental? Now this really depends on where you live. If you live in a small town, this is going to be a little bit more difficult and you might have to think outside the box. I personally live in a small city, so we do have some options available, but they're not going to be listed on major websites. So there's a few websites you can go to that are specifically for artists and creatives to find spaces to rent. One of those is called PureSpace, which is an amazing website. It's kind of, think Airbnb for creatives. There's a lot of different places, and it ranges the whole gamut from residential spaces to commercial spaces to from natural light to completely artificial light, different spaces, different looks. I used a PureSpace rental just outside of Chicago for a client last year. One thing with PureSpace, it is usually major cities. So I live in Madison, Wisconsin, and PureSpace doesn't have any locations currently in Madison. However, there were listings on PureSpace for the Chicago area, so last year when I had a Chicago area client, I was able to use it where I can't locally. Another one is Home Studio List. This is also restricted to large cities only at this time. They are adding cities. Home Studio List is homes that are beautifully styled already for photo shoots. So if you need an interior setting, this is perfect. Again, really only located in larger cities at this time. If you live in a smaller area, Google and Facebook groups are going to be your best bet. I highly recommend being in some local Facebook groups, both other creatives and other business owners in general. I am part of Rising Tide Society, which has Tuesdays together, meetings all around the country, and there are chapters, mostly of creatives, small business owners, a part of that group, and they have a Facebook group for each chapter, and that's where I found a lot of helpful things like that. Photographers, some photographers will have their own studio, but also rent it out to others by the hour, just depending. I found a really great studio share last year by just looking up on Google. Sorry, not studio share, a studio rental on Google. Found one locally. Got really lucky. It's a really amazing studio. I'll share a couple images on the screen for you. Just a fabulous studio, and I found it on Google. Another place you can go if you need an indoor setting would be Airbnb or a hotel reservation. Both of those you'd want to check with the host or the person at the desk first before you book it and before you tell your client about it, just to get permission and make sure it's okay with the host. Okay, so now that you've found the perfect studio, how do we go about dealing with this? Now, if you're just doing mini sessions, obviously you need to include the cost of the location in your session fees. So let's say the studio is costing you $500 to rent for the day. You want to split that out between how many sessions you have and include that in your pricing. Now, if it's a one-off session, the client requests an indoor type studio location, you can give them two options. You can say, hey, I found this great studio. This is kind of the general look that we'll be getting in this studio. This is how much it will add to your session fee to rent this studio. If that's not something you'd like to invest in right now, I can set up a studio in your home. and you can bring a backdrop, or you can let them know, we'll find a well-lit area in your home to do this newborn session. So give them options. If they don't want to invest the extra in a studio, just make sure that you are not, unless it's your idea, make sure that you're not taking on that cost without passing it along to your client as well. Next, before you sign a rental agreement, make absolutely certain that you've read through all of their policies. This is really important because some studios, there's only certain types of photography they'll allow, and there's some that they won't. So for instance, some studio rentals will not allow you to do boudoir. You can only do child sessions. Or some studios will say, we really don't want kids here because this studio is not set up for children. So you need to check those policies in advance. You also want to check their cancellation policy. If your client cancels on you, you don't want to be left holding the bag. If the studio has a pretty strict cancellation policy, you want to make sure you put that in your client's contract so that if they cancel, there are ramifications. Some studios also limit how many people you can have in the studio at once. So if you're doing mini sessions that overlap, obviously with what's been going on the last year or so, that hasn't been a thing. We haven't had groups and things like that. But when things get back to normal, you're going to want to look out for that as well, making sure you don't have too many people at a time based on the studio's occupancy limits. Next, when you're scheduling your studio rental, make sure you add enough time to get there early for setup and to clean up when you're done. And I would usually add in a little extra time in case the session runs long. I actually thought I had enough time for my shoot in Chicago, adding a couple of hours on either side, but because some things got slowed down a little bit, I actually had to add extra time. Thankfully, the person I was renting the studio from was super flexible and didn't have anything else booked for the afternoon, so I was able to extend my session time, but next time I would add even more time, just in case your client is running late or something like that. And lastly, be prepared to provide proof of liability insurance. Many studio rentals require proof of liability insurance. Usually, in my area, it's usually $1 million policy, which is not super expensive at all. I have gear and liability insurance through the Hartford and their package choice program for photographers, and I pay, I think, $500 or $600 a year for that insurance, but it's really easy for me to go in and download the documentation I need to send to the studio, and that is just a cover thing for them. And I lied, there's one more thing. Make sure you clean up after yourself. So always leave studios the way you left them or cleaner. So make sure you sweep up if there's anything on the floor. All trash is in the trash. If they want you to take the trash out, make sure you do that. Follow all their policies so that you don't get charged a cleaning fee or just have a really bad relationship with that studio owner. I hope you have an amazing shoot. Thank you for watching. Please do like and subscribe so that I can keep making more videos for photographers.